Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your man, Tim Swain. Listen, I am sitting down with a young, creative, innovative leader that is going to be, listen, mark my words, one of Ghana's next rising stars. Maya, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Maya, I remember us having a conversation about, I don't know, maybe like 2 months ago. And I remember hearing your story about Ghana, about your experiences in the U.S. But the thing that stood out to me most was just hearing about your passion for the continent. So I said, listen, if nothing else, I have to sit down with this young, incredible lady and just share her story on camera so people can get that same kind of, that passion, right, that I felt about the continent when we talk. So for the folks that are just meeting for the first time, maybe introduce yourself, where you grew up, and what are you currently doing here in Ghana?
Okay, so my name is Maya Ifa Kaufman. I'm 26 years old. I was born in the US in Philadelphia. I moved to Ghana with my family when I was 4 years old, and I lived here the whole time until college. So I was about 18 or 19. I'm not so sure anymore, but I moved to the US and went back to Philly for college, and then after college, I came back here, and now I work at Ware Ghana as a digital marketing executive. I also do customer experience.
Wow. So you were born in Philly. What part of Philly?
So I was born in the campus of the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn. My mom was doing her master's at the time. So she met my dad there. And
so you were actually born on the campus?
I was born on campus.
Wow. So your mom and dad would just get into some heavy studying and decided to study biology, and pop, here you came. Something like that.
Something like that.
Well, okay, so you were born in Ghana. You were here, you were born in Philly.
Yes.
You came back to Ghana all the way up until it was time for university.
Yeah.
Now, were you traveling back and forth prior to going to university in the States?
No. I never went back till college, so I hadn't seen my family there. My dad's side of the family is American.
Okay.
They're white and they're in US. But I didn't see them until I went back for college, so I hadn't seen them for about 15 years.
Wow. So growing up here in Ghana, I want you, we talk a lot about sometimes the not so great aspects of Ghana, but I want you to take me back to your childhood, maybe some of those fond memories of being raised here in Ghana. Maybe it could be the food that you've eaten. It could be the experiences that you had. What are some of those fond memories you have of Ghana prior to going to the U.S.?
Growing up, that's a lot. I love the food. My favorite food is Gary and groundnut soup. I love my groundnut soup. My grandmother, actually, when I was born and I was in the U.S. with my mom, my grandmother would come. So she came when I was born. She came again when my sister was born there. And she would make groundnut soup. And it was my favorite thing ever.
Really?
So I've loved it since I was that young. So that's something
until this day,
have to have.
It's still your favorite?
It's still my favorite.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the food, I love the warmth. I don't like cold at all. So I want to be in the warmth. I love the warmth. And I love the people. Like, people are very, obviously not everybody, but most people are really nice, friendly, helpful. So.
Wow. What you're saying really is sometimes a little bit different than what I hear from the average young person that's growing up in Ghana. Right? Sometimes their memories are not as fond, and their whole goal is to kind of, no matter what happens, let me get out of this country. And you're actually one of those people. I don't want to use the terminology get out because it implies that Ghana is not a place that you should be. But that is what some people, some people kind of, that's the narrative that oftentimes goes around. But you grew up here, and then 18 or 19, whatever, however old you were, you went back to the States for university. So talk to us about, how was that experience growing up in Ghana and then going to America for the first time? Were there any cultural shocks that you had? And if so, maybe name some of the ones that stood out the most.
Okay. Yeah, it was an exciting time, first of all. I was excited to go and experience something new. I'm a very curious person, so I was really excited to see something different, meet new people, have new experiences. But there were definitely cultural shocks, some good, some bad. I I think one of the first times I really felt it when I was in my first year was I used to get these like muscle pulls in my legs, like really bad muscle pulls, and then I wouldn't be able to walk for a moment. And one time that happened in Ghana. It's like someone I didn't know. I have no idea who this woman. I don't even remember her face or her name or anything. She just came out of nowhere. She's like massaging my legs so I couldn't walk again.
In Ghana?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the kind of thing people will do here. Like they don't get to see you limping and then just ignore you.
Yeah.
But it happened in the US and like no one even turned their eye, or people would even give you funny looks. Like, what's wrong with you? That kind of thing. So that's when it first hit me. I remember that day I cried a lot.
Yeah, if somebody came up and started massaging your leg in the U.S., that's called sexual assault. Somebody would say, take that person to jail. It's very different. It is not the same. Wow. I mean, so maybe just that sense of like, I think in Ghana, there's a sense of like, just connectedness, right? And genuine intent. I mean, I would have the same thing happen. I remember when I would be on the Trotro and I would be with my son. Like literally, well, you know, so I would be on the Trotro with my son and I don't know who this woman is. And it happened all the time. A woman would just take my son, just put him on her lap. And I mean, I was like, cool, because I don't have to carry this boy. So it was just that sense of like, you know, just genuine connectedness. All right. So, you know, I'm interested. I want you to think back to maybe a story, because everybody loves stories. What's been a story of maybe, and it's aside from like that muscle spasm, another one of your cultural shocks? It could be good, bad, or indifferent when you went back to the States.
Another thing that I guess I knew about it, you know, the racism, I knew, like everybody knows, but I didn't realize just how bad it was, how systemic it was until I went there and I saw myself. And I know I'm privileged because I'm not dark skinned, so there's definitely things that, and I'm a woman, so there's definitely things that I didn't experience, but just seeing it was very shocking to me. I remember the first time I realized like the segregation, the housing. So when my dad was living like in the suburbs outside Philly, and I realized where he and my granddad lived were like all white people. I didn't realize at first. At first, when I went, I didn't even notice such things. It's like that's also a privilege I think people coming from here have, because you've not lived your whole life having to worry about these things. But yeah, the first time I realized it was very shocking. So I was asking my dad, how come all the white people live here and all the black people live like in another area? And then he started explaining it to me, and I'm like, oh, that's intense. I can't imagine what it would have been like growing up in the US.
Traumatic. I'm gonna tell you right
and
now.
like there would be students in my courses, so some would after the class they would come and be like, oh, I was the only black person in class, and that was something I never even thought about before then. So when the person said that, I was like, oh no, like it's true, like I never even thought about it before. So I can't imagine how taxing it must be to be thinking about that all the time, and like, am I safe, am I in good company?
It could be taxing. So as you said, right, there's a certain level of privilege that you have culturally not to have to live like that every day, having grown up in Ghana. And even we'll get to people's perceptions of you, the Ghanaians versus the non-Ghanaians and other individuals. But so I'm curious, you talked about being a woman and being grown up in Ghana in terms of like the, you know, just culturally not having to think about it, which is really indeed something that is a privilege and a blessing. So I'm curious, what were people's perception of you when you went to the States? Where did people think you were from and your ethnicity? What are some of the things you got?
So when I went to the US, people were not as, like my whole life growing up here, it's actually been the other way around, where people are like, where are you from? And that's usually the first thing people want to know about me here. But in the US, it's like I'm blended in kind of most of the time. People weren't really concerned about where was I from. Like it wasn't the first thing that came up. If they wanted to get to know me, then they would ask, oh, where am I from? And people weren't really shocked if I said I was from Ghana. Except the West Africans, they were
from Ghana.
So they were shocked, but most people would just be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, from Ghana. It's no big deal."
Yeah, I remember there's a comedian by the name of Trevor Noah, and I'm gonna terribly mess up this joke, but he just talked about how when he was doing this comedy club, he was always just known as the comedian from Africa. That's all, just Africa, not South Africa, West, East, just Africa. And he says like this guy comes in the room and he sees the comedian from Africa. So he's looking at like who was the blackest person in the room, and he's like the guy was like, nah, that's not him. And he kind of looked at Trevor Noah, he's like, nah, he's not from Africa. And then he ended up saying, you the guy from Africa? And then he said something else that, we won't say on camera, but go and watch this special. It's hilarious. But so it just talks about people's perceptions, and especially when people hear the accent, right? People probably assume that a West African accent only sounds one way. So I'd imagine that, like, if I saw you in the States, I would assume, it depends on where I saw you. If I saw you in Florida or something like that, you could be, you never know. Or New York, you could be, it depends on where you are. You could be Puerto Rico. It depends on the day and the context that you're in.
But I think, like even in Philly, people would assume that I was Latina, especially off campus. Like, people would assume I was Latina and just start speaking Spanish with me. So
yeah, so it really just depends on people's exposure. Now, what did you actually study at UPenn?
I studied psychology.
Psychology.
Yes.
Wow. Now, what were your plans for psychology? Psychology is kind of like a broad, area.
To be honest, I didn't have a plan for it. I just knew I loved it. So I was actually like really young, maybe like 9 years old or something. We used to go to the book trust. I don't even know if it's still open. It's like they have they import all these books, like they're used books, but there are lots of books, all kinds of books. We used to go there all the time.
Here in Ghana?
Yes, in Ghana.
Okay.
Near UPSA.
Okay.
I don't know if they're still open. They even had a library at a point. I loved going there. I loved reading. And I found the psychology textbook and I would just read it. I was so obsessed with it. So it made sense.
You study psychology. Wow. Now, when you went to the States, because there's a lot of my audience are Americans, people from the UK, Ghanaians, like they're all over. And again, they're just so intrigued with like the story of the African that goes to America, because I have so much content on the African or the African American or the American that comes to Ghana, but not the other way around. One of the questions I'm sure people want to know is, aside from some of those cultural shocks, maybe the ones that are more challenging, what were some of the good cultural shocks where you're like, wow, this is America, like this is what the movies or whatever is?
I would say food. Even though I love Ghanaian food, it's always my favorite, but the variety in food, like even if you go to the grocery store, you see so many different things from all over the world. Like, people are eating all kinds of interesting things. There's always something new to try. So I really loved that. Yeah, that was one of my favorite things. I mean, in the beginning, I had trouble eating. For the first week, I really couldn't eat much because everything was cheese and it was very rich flavors. I got used to it and I like it, but at the time it was a bit difficult.
Yeah, a lot of sugar, salt.
Sugar and big portions. The first time I went to a restaurant in the US, I was shocked. I was like, is this the usual size of food? Like, how do people eat all this? It was a lot of food.
Really? Because I found that when I came to Ghana, like the plate, especially if you order rice dishes, the plate will be this big. 99% will be rice, and then you have like some vegetables. There's like 0.5, and like 0.5 would be meat. So I thought it's interesting because when I came to Ghana, it's like, oh my God, this is like enough rice? Literally, there are some restaurants I go to right now. There is literally enough rice for me and my whole family to eat.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like in the US, it's usually lots of meat or dairy stuff, and then like a small bit of rice. And sometimes I'll get upset because I'm like, I want to eat rice. I want to be full. And then you're giving me sandwich or like a small thing of rice and all this chicken.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, now you can see why we have such a health problem in America. Wow, it's I didn't realize until I went back to America, like, and I just kind of observed some stuff. It's like, okay, I can see why, because there's food everywhere. You can literally get whatever you want any time of the day.
I loved that too. The 24/7.
24/7.
Places open 24/7. I used to go to the grocery store after studying. I would go to the grocery store at like midnight to go and shop for my groceries. I liked that a lot.
Wow. So when now you finished school and then it was time for you to come back to Ghana. So when you told, let's say, your family and things like that it was time to come back to Ghana, what was their perception?
Oh, they were waiting for me to come back.
Really?
Yeah.
So
my mom was even like, when am I coming?
So people didn't think you were crazy for leaving Ghana, making it to America, heaven, right? Some people's perception. And then coming back to Ghana, or it's just like, no,
Not my family. I mean, lots of other people though. People tell me all the time, why did I come back?
Really?
But not my family.
Your family was they knew, but the other.
And they even told me before going that I need to come back. And
So what made them so like passionate about having you come back to Ghana? Was it just they wanted their baby back home, or was it that we need you to come and make an impact? What was it?
I think it was a bit of both, especially from my mom. So my mom is a professor at the University of Ghana, and she's always talking. She herself went to UPenn. She did all her degrees there from bachelor's to PhD, and she came back because she believes it's important to give back to your community to help make Ghana a better place for all of us.
So Maya, you're now back in Ghana, and you said some of your family, they wanted you to come back home, but maybe some of your friends and stuff like that thought you were out of your mind. How was that transition for you, leaving America and then coming back to Ghana? And maybe share a story of some moments where you felt like, Charlie, it's good to be back.
Cool.
And then maybe something that made you feel like, Charlie, why did I leave America?
So I was actually really happy to be back. I was excited to be back. I love being here. This is my home. I was excited to see my family, but I was also really excited because I'd had an interview over, like a WhatsApp video interview with the CEO of Wear Ghana.
Okay.
Talking about how I wanted to start a career in digital marketing. And yeah, the company looked really interesting. I liked the impact projects and the fact that they are really interested in creating opportunities for women. Most of the team is women, like over 80% women. And they had impact projects, like one of them was the project Hustle, where they took, Kaya or streets, women, streets boys, like the people who carried stuff in the market, Kaya.
Yeah.
And they trained them to model, did a fashion show and raise funds for them to, pursue their interests. So I found that really interesting and inspiring. So I was really excited to come back and meet the team and start working here.
Wow. Now, what about, were there any moments where, I mean, you were only in the States for 4 years, right? Or 3 years. How long was college for you?
So it was 4 years, although I took a leave in between. So
Okay.
it took about 5 years.
5 years. Which is, I mean, well, that's a good amount of time to get adjusted and readjusted. Were there any moments when you came back and you were frustrated and it made you question, why did you come back to Ghana?
Not really. Like I said, I grew up here, so it wasn't so hard for me. The only thing I would say is maybe I know if I were working in the US, I'd probably be paid higher than I am here. I probably wouldn't have to live with my mom. I live with my mom, my siblings, we all live together.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like that, but I would also like to be able to do more, like financially. So that's definitely one ahead though.
Yeah, that's one of the things a lot of people talk about, which is the reality of the economic challenges. And I was telling someone when I first started working, this is with a master's degree back in the day, my first job out of college paid, it was less than $30. I worked at Austin Community College. Shout out to ACC. But I worked at Austin Community College. I got paid less than $30,000 as a student life coordinator or assistant, whatever it was. But I was telling someone that's an entry-level job. There's nowhere you're going to go in Ghana as an entry-level position and make 27,000 USD. There's nowhere, unless you're doing some illegal stuff.
Or it's like an international.
Unless it's an international company, but like the equivalent of 27,000 in Ghana cedis. Hey, you won't make it. So aside from like some of the economic challenges, I keep going back to the challenges because I'm really kind of dispelling the myth, right? So many people that I talk to believe that there's nothing but challenges here. There's nothing, there's no good here on the continent. And we are going to talk about, there's a lot of good. And your conversation today has reminded me that everybody's experience is different. But then you talked about maybe some of the small economic adjustments when you came back. But Maya, I want to keep it real. You're in Ghana. We know that you're going to make an incredible impact. What are some of those areas that you see right now that maybe frustrate you just in general, or some of the improvements that we can make in our overall country?
So I think education is a big one. I definitely think we need to take a closer look at our education system. And my mom is a big advocate for that, so I'm biased in that way. But we need to have more critical thinking, more problem solving being taught in our schools, and not just in like STEM, where that's where people usually are talking about. So I think people just need to be creative, more creative in general. We don't need to just be writing exams to pass and then move to the next stage. And then the attitude. So I don't know, how can people just wake up one day and be like, yeah, this is where I should be, I'm proud to be Ghanaian. It starts from, it's easier to teach children these things, to have this attitude, than to reverse that in adults.
You're saying that we don't have that kind of pride.
I don't think
okay.
we don't emphasize it enough from a young enough age. I feel like for some people it's more of a movement, and so it's like a few people are talking about it, adults. We are not really making it a part of our everyday lives, especially in our schools, and that's how we end up. Even teachers are there criticizing everything about Ghana, and so what else do you expect people to grow up and do? And I know it's tough. It's really tough, especially now. So it makes sense that people want to leave and find other things, but there are people who could make such a difference here who don't even stop to think, what could I do to try and help the situation? What could I do for myself and my family? How can I be creative and solve some problems? Like, I think you need to do that first before saying, okay, the only thing I want to do is leave. That's my dream. And like, you haven't really thought about what you can do.
I hear this statement a lot, and I agree with you. But then here's a question I have for you. Is it the responsibility of the citizens to create all of this change that we want to see in Ghana?
It's absolutely not. It's absolutely not. The government definitely needs to do a better job, but it doesn't mean we should all give up. We can't all give up on our country. Then who's going to make any difference here?
You mentioned something off camera that was really, really, really impactful to me. You talked about no matter the opportunity, no matter where you go, Ghana is home. Why do you feel so strongly about that? And who instilled that sense of cultural pride and country pride in you for you to be so affirmed in that?
I think my mom is definitely a big one. My family and my mom especially. Even my dad. My dad is American, but he loves Ghana.
Yeah.
And
we know. You're here.
So yeah, I've grown up like hearing from people like her and from her herself that we have a lot to offer. There are amazing people and amazing opportunities in Ghana. We just need to figure out how to make things work. And it's not something I can really explain. It's like when you love someone, sometimes you just love them. It's not really for a particular reason. I mean, there are many of things I love about Ghana, but I don't think I can pinpoint this and say that's why I love Ghana. I just love Ghana. I love Africa, and I always will.
Wow. I've never, when I say this, I'm honest to God, truthful. I've never heard someone put it that way, where, like, I just love Ghana because there's not a particular reason. I've actually never heard anyone say it that way. And I think that it's a testament to so many people that are like you, that are out there, who I believe will be incredibly inspired by this story, because it's a unique story. It talks about the cultural challenges of adjusting into multiple societies, but then finding your place back home. So what's the future look like, Maya?
Well, I'm really interested in pursuing my master's now in human-computer interaction. I'm interested in user experience design.
Okay. You have to break that down. I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, so I'm interested in digital technology in general. So user experience has to do with, creating apps, websites, any kind of digital system that helps people achieve certain things. It needs to be user-friendly. We need to think about how people are using it. And so that's what I'm interested in doing. Yeah.
And you talked about how you envision utilizing that as a skill set that you can use to improve not just Ghana, but the continent. How so?
Yes, because now our world is always getting increasingly more digital. Everything is digital these days. And so we need to be able to compete in the global marketplace. So our businesses need to be able to compete. We need better solutions for education, for health, all of those things. And so I want to be able to be part of that, helping us grow in terms of, the digital landscape.
Wow. There's a person out there watching right now. I want you to talk directly to them. They're a Ghanaian. They left Ghana. They didn't leave like you and saying, I'm going to come back because I love Ghana. They're saying, Charlie, I've left. I'll never come back to this place. what would you say to that person that's watching?
I mean, I would say it depends on what you're doing, really. That's another thing I think. Like I said, the world is becoming increasingly digital. I don't think you need to necessarily live here full time to be able to give back, but you definitely should be doing that. Even if you're outside, let's say you do marketing, you could always find ways to give back to the community in that way without being here full time. But we also do need people to live here and, or contribute in that way. But I don't think everyone needs to come back, but we all need to give back in our own little way.
Yes. Maya said, come back home. She said, come back. Let me see if I can get this right. Brafier, come home. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I know that you love this content. I'm trying to get to 20, maybe 30,000 subscribers in the next few months. So if this is your first time, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, like this video. Until next time, peace.